Next up, we've got Doug Diefenthaler talking to us about a really interesting operation that we just knew nothing about called Vara Winery and Distillery. And it's still an evolving scenario, but very interesting.
But who knew, including us, that the first vines were planted in the United States in the state of New Mexico.
Oh, right.
Which at the time was not yet a state of New Mexico, it was Mexican territory.
I always thought that the first vines were planted in Pennsylvania. I'd heard that somewhere.
Well, most of the story says the planting was in the missions in California.
Yeah, which makes sense.
But it turns out that isn't even right either. So here's Doug to tell us the story.
Okay, we're talking to Doug Diefenthaler. It's been a complicated road to be able to talk to you, Doug, about Vara wines. Are you feeling good?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the new year.
Oh, aren't we all? Let's hope.
We're hoping somebody's going to jab us in the bum or the shoulder or something.
No, I know about the wines. The correct title is Vara Wine and Spirits, too?
Well, Vara Winery and Distillery, but, the winery is first and foremost. Distillery is another project that we have, and it's very exciting, and we're doing very well to get off the starting blocks with. But the winery's been up and running for a couple of years, and real proud of where we've come with those items.
Well, tell us about where you are and the backstory of what the winery is about.
Sure. It all starts with real bona fide New World, Old World history. We've actually got history here in New Mexico. We reside in the state of New Mexico, which before it was ever a state, obviously before the United States was ever the United States, back in 1629, what became New Mexico is the site of where the very first Vitis vinifera grapes, in other words, native to the European continent,
really,
winemaking grapes, were ever planted here in the New World, because vinifera, grapes like Cabernet and Chardonnay and Tempranillo and Albarino and Pinot Noir, these aren't native to the Western Hemisphere. They're native to the European continent. Vitis vinifera. In the Western Hemisphere, Vitis labrusca is native to this continent, and they have names that you might be familiar with, names like Niagara and Concord. They make wine, but they tend to make a little better jelly.
There's one in Missouri, right? What's the name of the one in Missouri?
There's almost every state now grows winemaking grapes. As a matter of fact, I believe they all do, but some of them are concentrated on Labrusca varieties, and they're for the most part in the eastern states where they were found and developed. But a lot of them have moved from the Labrusca varieties to French-American hybrid, in other words, hybrids between vinifera and Labrusca. Vara celebrates the very first vinifera that was successfully planted, propagated, and continually harvested and made into wine in the United States, or what became the United States. We're extremely proud of that being the location where it came from. California being the second location, which dated 140 years after they were planted and propagated, harvested, and made into wine here in New Mexico. 1769 was the first date of their plantations of vinifera vineyards, while 1629 and every year since then, they've been harvested here in New Mexico. That's a proud point for us because New Mexico typically lacks prominence on lists of best or worst or first or last here in the U.S. We don't get to be first at very much. And this is something we're clearly first at, being the cradle of the American wine experience right here, 140 years before California.
I never knew any of this. It's just amazing.
And the cradle was pretty close to where Trump is building his wall, right?
Well, it's still probably 180, 90, 200 miles from where that was. But
okay.
The Spaniards came in through the Gulf of Mexico to an area near Veracruz, came in toward Mexico City, and then the King of Spain in the day, late 1500s, had the original Camino Real constructed into the North Country, which is New Mexico and USA proper. And they traveled up the Camino Real, which as soon as it got to the Rio Grande River, which initiates and has its headwaters in the southern Colorado Rockies, and then down, splits the state of New Mexico in half, and then goes down and rides the New Mexico-Texas border for a way, and then it obviously is the Texas-Mexico border before it empties into the Gulf of Mexico. The Spaniards that brought these cuttings from Spain came up the Camino Real and found a suitable place along the Rio Grande, very near where Socorro, New Mexico is today. And you'll find that on the map to be quite in central New Mexico. And so that is where they first planted vinifera. And in 4 years later, in 1633, the vines were mature enough to provide fruit for winemaking. And every year since then, wine has been made from that varietal, which was known as, or is known as, Listan Prieto. Prieto is the dark skin of the Prieto. The Listan grape is a white grape. The Listan Prieto is the dark-skinned Listan. And it's also known, Listan is also known as Palomino in Spain, which you might know as the grape variety that makes sherry. But this is a dark-skinned variety, the Listan Prieto, and by the time it's planted in California, it was planted on their small Camino Real, which went from Baja up along the coast to the San Francisco Bay, just north side Vallejo and Sonoma, and it was the trail where all the missions of California were built along.
Right.
And so the variety became known as the mission variety in the U.S. because this is what they had planted at each mission to provide for their daily sacraments.
Now, hold on a second now. I want to add another unusual component, as if this isn't unusual enough. There's something else unusual going on, because you're not satisfied to say enough we'll have the vines you just described. We also want to introduce a foreign component. So somehow or other you're bringing in grape juice or grapes or what?
Well,
which I'm not sure, from Spain.
We do. We celebrate the Spanish connectivity, the Spanish foundation of the American wine experience, and their partnership in New Mexico, coming here and opening up New Mexico from Europe. And in order to do that, we do make wine from heirloom grapes of the Listan Prieto. We call it Viña Cardinal, and to speak of Viña being vine and Cardinal being a cardinal point, or the primary, the first. So the first vine was Listan Prieto here. It's certainly not the current most prominent vine of the Vitis vinifera family, but we do make that wine, and people like it considerably. It's an aperitif that is fortified the way that the monks of the day in 1633 fortified their wine. But in celebration of that whole concept of bringing wine to the New World, we do it by being very Spanish-centric. And yes, we use Spanish indigenous varietal grapes from the West Coast, and we use Spanish indigenous varietal from Spain. Things like Tempranillo, Albarino, Garnacha, Monastral. These grapes are a lot more contemporary for fine table wine making, and so yes, we also employ those kinds of varieties to spread out our product line.
Now, are you growing you're growing the grapes in New Mexico? Now? You're not.
The Listan Prieto the Listan Prieto is grown here in New Mexico. While there is some of those other varieties grown here, they're not of the potential that we need in order to make the level of table wine that we want to make and show to people. So we look for the very best examples of those Spanish varieties that we can find, and we found some vineyards we like very much in the cool climate of the south central coast of California, the lower part of the Edna Valley, and then into Santa Maria and Santa Barbara County.
Well,
some real good vineyards for these.
Doug, let me make sure I'm understanding you correctly. So, in the descriptions of the wines that you sent us, you name grapes which are recognizable, being from Spain, but you're saying that the rootstock, if you like, is from Spain, but it's actually the grapes are actually grown in the United States.
For part of our line, that is true. For the introductory part of our line, we make 4 table wines that we raise the grapes in Spain itself. We process the grapes as near as possible to the vineyard, and we get them fermentation stable. In other words, basic wine stability. We take that wine, we put it in 1,000-liter totes, we call them, and they're 1,000-liter containers, and seal them, and we put them in a shipping container and bring them here to our winery in Albuquerque, where we then barrel them down and let them age here, and then we partake in some assembly and blending if the wine needs any affecting support before blending and bottling. It gets it here. We are in complete control of the final product. Then it's finished and out of barrel for bottling, and we bottle it right here at our winery. So while we do have some American appellation Spanish varietal wine, we also have Spanish appellation Spanish varietal wine.
Now, what brought you to our attention was that not only producing wines that sound very interesting. By now our listeners are probably entirely hooked on saying, boy, there's some new wines here I must try. But you did a little prize winning too. Tell us something about that.
Yeah, we've been proud of our wine for a long time, and coming from New Mexico, different competitions have wine from all over the place. Our New Mexico hasn't traditionally fared real well with their wines in some of these. I'm talking about San Francisco International Competition, the San Francisco Chronicle Competition, the New York International Competition, the Sommelier, New Sommelier Competition. These kinds of competitions aren't a single writer that sits down and sees the wine, pours it out of a bottle, and gives it a score and a tasting note, which we're very used to seeing in a lot of publications. These are actual competitions where there is more than 24 probably professionals from the wine industry that are in a tasting panel that are double blind, have no idea where the wine came from and no idea what the wine is, and they score them based on a tasting and profile and a card that they have developed for this. We for the last several. Excuse me. I'm sorry if that disrupted.
That's all right.
It was a fall.
Okay.
Anyways, for the last couple of years, we've always been fortunate enough to win a silver here or there. This last year, the San Francisco International Competition, with all these judges and 8,600 wines from around the world, I would say we got a body of work reward because we ended up getting, I think, 3 gold medals, 4 silver medals, and 2 bronze medals.
Yeah, there was a whole raft of them.
Yeah, basically our entire lineup medaled very well. And anything in the medal range is, if you're bronze, you're like 89 points and above. If you're silver, you're into the 90s. And if you're gold, you're hovering close to the top if you're not there. And then, we did the same thing on the other coast, on the New York International Wine Competition. We ended up scoring for the body of work with those kinds of medals as well. And it really was gratifying to see the recognition from other wine professionals for what we're doing here in New Mexico with the best that we can possibly put forward with our means, our equipment, our focus, and our kind of premonition about what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, what made the difference that you're suddenly being noticed? I mean, did you make any changes to process?
Not really. I think what we possibly a little bit, because our notion each vintage is to be as good or better than we were last year. That's really dependent upon the fruit, and it's dependent upon how we handle it. And a big part of that was making sure that we're handling it all here. No matter where the original fruit was grown, we're handling it all here, and we're applying nothing but our own, labor and motivation to the final product. And that could be part of it, I'm sure, but it's also our insistence that last year was good, we're going to do better next year.
Well, where did you come in? I mean, how did you end up in this business?
You're talking about me personally?
Yes.
Well, I graduated from Ohio State in 1978 with a degree in agricultural economics and business. Uh-huh. And I discovered very shortly after that the winery, vineyard, viticulture, enology was part of the agricultural business aspect, and I thought that sounded a lot more interesting than just basic fruit, vegetables, beef, pork, chicken, fish, what have you. So I dedicated my early career to getting into that business, and before the end of 78, I was in it. And this is all I've done, was the fine wine business, fine beverage business that comes ultimately from the soil, from the ground. And this is a labor that isn't, as it can be laborious. I think it's a cliche to say if you do something that you like, you never work a day in your life. We work hard, but we enjoy what we do. And so this has taken me through my life's career, and I have not been a producer until we initiated our entity, Vara Winery, in April of 2014. And it's until then I was always on the importing, fine distribution, and marketing side of the wine business. This is since 14 I've been involved for the first time as a producer, and it's the same industry and all the same issues and more things to learn, and it's got my attention, and this is how I'll finish out, I'm sure. There won't be another venture for me in the industry, because this is the cumulative effort of everything I've done.
Now, talk to us about the other thing we mentioned at the beginning, which is the distillery side of the business.
Yeah, well, we're very aware that Spain and the Spanish are very early, very, very early pioneers of distilling. The earliest distillations were Muslim, came from the Moors and across in Africa. I mean, there was distilling throughout the Muslim world, but it was primarily aromatics, perfumes, things like that.
I thought they didn't drink.
They didn't. And they still distilled, but they distilled things for other purposes, not for alcohol.
Oh, okay, got it.
They brought it across to the Iberian Peninsula, and those folks thought distilling was pretty cool, but they decided to take some other basic material and distill it. And what that was either wine for brandy, or grains, or mash for spirits. And they were very successful at that. It spread through Europe, into Northern Europe, Central Europe, throughout the world. Distilling became known. Well, we were very aware of that, and we're also, apart from our just dying appreciation for the wines of Spain, you go to the south into Jerez, in that area where sherry is abound and prominent, but also brandy de Jerez, a brandy that is unique in the world, not being that it's made from grape-based wine like any other brandy might be, whether it's cognac or Armagnac or anything else, but it is then aged in a different manner. It's aged the way they age sherry, in a Solera system of barrels that rotate and continue to compound. And so I've always been an admirer of that brandy there. And so we thought, well, we've got wine. If we get a still, we can put some wine in that still, and we could make some brandy. And if we get some used sherry barrels, we could develop a Solera system and start making a Spanish-style brandy right here in the U.S. And so that's what we did. We got a 1,000-liter still, hand-hammered, hand-soldered, 1,000-liter Alcatera, or a pot still, from Hoga Stills of Spain, Hoga.
Oh, yeah, right.
And it's a lovely piece of work in itself, because it's very classic. We've been putting a good amount of wine, and this is all basically New Mexico wine that isn't bottled, that goes into that, and we make a brandy, which the first highest grade that comes out, the Spanish would call Hollandaise, and that was because their initial customer for that level of brandy were the people from Holland, or the Hollanders, and they called it Hollandaise. So we make our version of that, and we call it Paso Uno, which translates to step one, or the first step. And it's the first step in making a brandy de Jerez or a Solera aged brandy, because you first have to get it to that point, and then it goes into barrel for Solera aging. So we've played with that, and of recent, really, and we're going to continue to take that and improve on it. But of recent release, and very, very, very happy to say that our other production has actually stepped in front and gotten some recognition. A lot of people don't realize that gin is in fact the second most consumed distilled spirit among the Spanish people.
Yeah, I do. we know that. It's a big deal.
And it's because of the long influence of the Britons that have been there, and Spain has grown accustomed to and a fancy for gin. And they make some Mediterranean gin. They make some gin of their own. We found that while we were there every year doing our rounds and our interviews and our consulting with our viticulturalists and our enologists there. We found gin to be very interesting there, and so we put together one here, and be doggone, Proof Awards competition gave it 99 points and a double gold.
Really? What style is it?
We were inspired by the Mediterranean gins of the Iberian Peninsula, but we don't have the ocean nearby us, but we do have the desert. And so we've termed it a high desert gin because some of the aromatics come from very high altitude harvest, and they're also aromatics that aren't used in London gins or necessarily in the Mediterranean gins. A lot of our aromatics are. It's a juniper base, which is the same almost throughout the gin community, but and there's citrus aspects. But we also use some sage and some other things from the high desert that really give it a uniqueness and a very pronounced, very elegant, while light, and flavor and aromatic that just lifts you. It's got a wonderful mouthfeel and viscosity. It's not a very bold, big brute of a London dry gin. It is a more airy and complex gin, kind of similar to the Mediterranean gins of Spain, but different enough based on the aromatics we use. So
you have to tell us when that's available.
It's available here now, but I'm afraid that's something that doesn't get shipped because it's a spirituous beverage, and they don't allow that going through the mail just yet. So,
okay, well, when you can put us on your list.
You got it.
We're gin
but it's
drinkers.
lovely. Along with that, we've kind of done a compromise with the Viña Cardinal, the aperitif that we made from the Listan Prieto. We are also admirers, when we're in Spain, of the vermouth that they make.
Right.
And it's not really light cocktail recipe vermouth. It's vermouth to be taken solo as its own.
Yeah.
And
it's a big
an
thing.
hour of the vermouth, in the hour of vermouth on the afternoon, a little aperitif that is a brightening pick-me-up. And so we make a secco and a dulce, and that, however, is shippable because it's still in a aperitif wine category, though it is fortified to about 16.5% alcohol. It's a wonderful example of old world vermouth.
Didn't we interview somebody who makes that rabbit?
We have interviewed people who made vermouth, but
in Spain, I mean.
No, we dealt with with people making the what was the name of the spirit? That's
I thought vermouth itself, actually, that we thought.
No,
I don't know.
The one we drank at that place in Spain, in southern Spain.
That was not what I was thinking of.
It was called PX, Pedro Jimenez.
Pedro Jimenez.
Yeah, but that's not. I thought there was a vermouth maker we interviewed.
That's typically a dessert wine.
Right. Well,
actually,
but it is fortified. Yeah.
We drank it actually with our meal. It was we had a meal, a lunch with the people who owned the producer, who owned the facility.
Well,
and they say you have to start with a beer so you don't get hungover. You start with a beer and then you drink this all through lunch.
I actually have had dry Pedro Jimenez made as a dry white table wine, and it's very good. But predominantly, most Pedro Jimenez goes into a fortified dessert wine. predominantly.
Right.
But it's lovely. It's lovely as an opening wine for a lunch or a dinner. I agree with you entirely. It can be very lovely.
Well, this is all very interesting. I wasn't so sure that there was that much information, but we could probably go on a long time more on this. But I guess we've run out of time. So I want to thank you for talking to us about all this. It's very exciting, and there's so much information to pick up on all this. We seem to be having a lot of fun, Doug.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, again, listeners, it should go on your list for sure.
I appreciate that.
Vara, V-A-R-A Vineyards.
Vara Vineyards.
Vara Wines. If you would like to, and your listeners, to check Vara Wines, VARAWINES, VaraWines.com is our website. And there's an awful lot of information there, and it's good information. And there's also a way to join Club Vara, which is no cost to get started whatsoever. It's just buy the wine that is shipped every other month, 4 bottles every other month that I curate and select, and discounted, of course. And it's a good way to get to know us, especially if you're at a distance and not able to stop in this evening and try us out in person.
Yeah. Well, you seem to be having a lot of fun, and you're fun to talk to. So,
well, thank you. It is, like I said, if you do what you like, you don't work a day in your life.
Right. Good advice. Well, Doug, thank you so much, and continuing. Best luck with your distillery efforts, too.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be here.
Do you remember the radio broadcaster named Paul Harvey?
Yes.
Paul,
and that's the rest of the story.
We're doing Paul Harvey today, and as Paul would say, that is the rest of the story. So thank you for listening to Vara Wines and Naughty Vines, and we'll see you again same time, same place next week. And until then,
bye-bye.